Welcome. Hello. Good evening or good afternoon. I hope that you are ready to start working on our stories. I'm Leslie, and if you have been joining me for the other Preptober videos, then we will have been starting to get the story together. Week one was sort of the brainstorming, the laying the groundwork, working on the story seed, and mind mapping, finding ways to get inspiration for our ideas. Week two. So there's two videos this week that will be about the goal for the week is to get to the first draft of the outline. So I'm excited to get started. Let me know how your weekend was. Today I actually got through my to-do list, which is a rare thing indeed. And I'm super excited about that. So yeah, we'll be connecting our character, plot, and world. And there is a free worksheet that you can download. The link should be in the description. I will pop it on the screen. lpen.co/storydev to get started on taking what we've done, building on the work that we've already done so far in the first two sessions, and just getting to the point today of having a log line. So a story statement or a log line. Actually, let me put my headphones in to make sure that it's not echoing. Let me know if you can hear me okay, because I forgot to do that. And I meant to. Uh-oh, Dragon Maiden had a crazy week. Many weeks are crazy for me. Let me make sure the sound is still working properly. Hold on for 1 second. Okay. I think we should be good. Awesome. Thank you for checking in. I had the headphones here. I don't like the way they feel in my ears, so I don't tend to wear them all the time, but don't want bad audio. Nothing worse than that, right? Okay, so go ahead and open up the workbook if you have not already, and we'll just be working through it today. So you'll have to make a copy of the workbook into your own Google Drive. Hopefully that's self-explanatory. You've done this before with other documents. All right, the first thing in the workbook, and I can share it actually, is the vision statement. So this is what we were working on before. I just popped in the vision statement that I've been working with. I haven't really updated it because it still feels good to me, but at any point during the process, I will go back and update the vision statement and make sure that it's still relevant. It's still what I want the story to be. Usually, I don't have to update it. I don't really update it very much because that initial push is what's driving me through the story. But if I, do some research and discover some other aspect that I think would be really cool. So I'm still telling a story about a young woman who is taken from her life of drudgery into this magical world of mystery and wonder and discovers something important about herself and her origin. It is purposefully vague because I have ideas, but today is actually kind of the thing when we'll be brainstorming the various ideas, and all of you will be at different points in your story. But I have ideas about how this is going to go, but I want to keep. For me, it's important to keep it open a little bit, to have some wiggle room so that I'm not too attached to any specific ideas. Just because I know I'm going to be discovering things during the process of learning about these characters, who they are, what they want. And so I want flexibility. When my mind is rigid, it's harder for me to continue. And it's harder down the line to change my mind if I'm super attached to things. There are some fixed points that I am very attached to. I think we'll talk about that on Wednesday. But right now, it's loose. It's more about the vibe for me. My vision statement is like the type of story I want to create is hopeful. It's this fantasy romance, but that all goes into it. So in this situation, and again, what I'm working on is a world that is sort of a mid-century-esque vibe. So I want to do a secondary fantasy world. I have been watching Pushing Daisies. I mentioned that in the last video, and very good idea. I love Pushing Daisies. I hadn't seen it in many years, and it's sparking that joy and hope. And it's interesting because the tone of that show, it's like bright colors. It's got that sort of 50s-esque vibe with the clothes. The women are always in heels and the skirts, like with the poofy skirts. Well, not always those, but and hats, and the cars are very classic. So that whole energy and vibe is something that I'm trying to capture. But in that show, it also balances that bright, sort of kitschy, stylized aesthetic with talking about death. You know, the whole point of that television show is that the main character can bring people back from the dead for a minute. After a minute, someone else will die in their place, someone random, and they're solving murder, solving crimes. And so there's a darkness there that is really balanced out and almost overwhelmed by the aesthetic, which I think is why they chose to do that. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Like, how can I incorporate that into a book and give that energy? So within the world of the story, the situation, or the inspiration that you're working with, what kinds of characters are needed? So we do the character assessment, and then we'll do something about the world. And yes, Pushing Daisies is an amazing show, and I'm a few episodes into the first season. I'm savoring it. I'm not trying to binge it. I'm trying to like spread it out because it's only, 2 short seasons. So this is really put what you know here or what you don't know. I mean, use the book however you need to, but how I approach it is I want to get a handle on the types of characters I'll be creating. So I have an idea about my hero and my heroine for this romance, and I know that there's going to be a crew of warriors, and there's going to be some side characters. I think I'm going to set it in a small town. And so, what types of characters are needed to tell the story that is a romance, a little bit of adventure, but I don't want to go heavy on the adventure because I want that sort of cozy vibe while still having, to balance out any darker themes or the idea that maybe demons are trying to invade this world and our warriors are battling them. But maybe some of them are reluctant, or maybe my hero is a reluctant warrior. I had the idea this week that he would rather be a librarian. I'm just going to go with that for the moment. And our heroine has been hired from her job as a maid in like a hotel or an inn to clean this home where the warriors live. This is the basis of the story that I'm building. So characters, I obviously need my heroine. I don't have any names yet. And she's a maid. Hero, who I think is a reluctant warrior, who would rather be a librarian. I'm going to follow this thread until I can't anymore. I'm going to try to do like a bullet thing. Oh. I have the crew of warriors, and this is just a table, so you should be able to just make it bigger as you need to. It's pretty flexible. And they're all going to have their own different personalities. And if this is a series, I have an eye towards each of these people getting their own book in the future. I don't know. I've been writing. I've had a long series. I've had some standalones. Part of this is determining what you want to be writing. I mean, obviously, series is highly recommended, especially if you're going indie. But I don't know if this is an indie book or if this is a traditionally published book yet. Usually I do know at the beginning because I am hybrid. For this book, it depends on how it ends up going. I could see a path towards sending this to my publisher if the book ends up it's hard to describe, but like if I think it could be commercially, like traditionally published, successful. Otherwise, if it's going to be more of a standard paranormal romance, I would probably self-publish that. But I don't know. And I don't want to think about series too hard right now. So crew of warriors, but it's always good to seed the ground for series potential. Unless you know that you want to do a standalone. I want there to be a butler at this house for the warriors. And if these warriors are being secretive, then the butler could be, there's 2 ways it could go. The butler could be an antagonist to my heroine or a friend, a supportive character. I think I want him like more warm and fuzzy, but maybe a little standoffish, maybe like scary on the outset, but he's really a teddy bear inside and really gooey. So I'm going to put like scary, externally really sweet. Okay, we have the small town folks. So I want to build a small town. I think I want a mayor. So let's just start with the mayor. And I don't know what he needs to do yet, but this is just part of the atmosphere and the vibe that I want to try to create. Because the tension between, these warriors who are trying to hide their supernatural abilities and this small town who doesn't know anything about the supernatural world. So I'll just answer small town folks ignorant of the supernatural. And then, of course, there are other supernatural people or characters. And I really need to figure out who those are. Yeah, more random questions are being generated. So Dragon Maiden in the comments. Lots of questions are going to come up from this. So Dragon Maiden 84 asks about, like, she's writing a Regency. Yeah, these are good questions. Like, these are things like make notes of and try to figure out, like, I'm thinking, okay, what creatures do I need? And am I pulling from, like, where am I pulling them from? Is it just going to be real creatures? So if this, my idea has been that this story sits in a sort of world that I've been writing short stories in that is very broad and loose, that is flexible actually. And so I've had other short stories that have had, wolf shifters, fairies, all sorts of traditional supernatural creatures. I can't remember that off the top of my head, but like anything you could probably think of. There was a bar. There was a short story I wrote for an anthology that had a bar where there was like a kitsune and like some kind of nymph, or So I feel like I can pull from that, and it's a little bit, people know what to expect if you say a brownie, or I mean, fairy could mean a lot of different things. There's a lot of different ways to have a fairy, so you have to figure out your fairies. But initially, people are familiar with that term. So, question from Dragon Maiden 84: do you have organization tips to keep track of research info? Yes. And I will be doing, one of the videos is on that. I think it's next week. But story Bible. Yeah, we're going to go over story Bibles. So it's probably a good idea to set that up early. But I write in Scrivener. And so sometimes I keep all my research in Scrivener. So I will start out and just have different, if you do use Scrivener, first of all, if so, if you're familiar with it, it has different sort of files, different documents inside of the one file that you can keep. So there's different ways that I've organized research in the past, but if you're thinking about, like, okay, homes, or that's kind of like daily life, so you can break it into different categories. I might have a document called daily life where I'll talk about, do they cook? Who cooks the food? Where do they get the food? Who shops? Do we need to know that information? I would probably start a file with the supernatural characters that I have, and depending on how much like screen time any of them would get, then I have to know their powers, their weaknesses. Are any of them going to be antagonists? I would start building that information. For me right now, I don't know enough yet. And so I sort of keep things in like much looser at this stage, but depending on what makes sense to you, it might be a good idea to start some kind of story Bible. And there is, I think, let me find the link. There is a link to the free story Bible guide that I have. I have to remember what it is. I think it's lpen.co/story Bible. That would make sense, right? But yeah, that's what it is. So I put that in the comments if you would like to download that. But I will do another video that's kind of on that too. Oh, hello, welcome. All right, so these are the types of characters. Oh, I also need bad guys, right? I need antagonists. So I'm thinking we're going to call them demons. I'm probably going to rename them because demon has a lot of different ways that it could mean. It could bump for some people, other people it won't bump for. I think I would like to just have a more unique name and create my own version of them. But until I do that, they're going to be called demons. And they're the antagonists. And eventually I'm going to have to figure out exactly what they want. And then there's going to be a big bad. I'm assuming he's going to be a demon, but I'm just going to put big bad just until I know more. And now this may or may not make it. It's possible that my hero is already in a relationship, or it has an ex-girlfriend. It's going to create tension. That was something that popped into my head. I'm not sure if I like yet. So I just put this question marks. The early stages are just kind of dumping out all the ideas and then kind of going back through them, filtering through them, and see what feels right for the story that I want to tell. And yeah, that's basically how it gets started. So my main characters, okay, from now on, I'm going to focus on the main characters, the hero and heroine. I know we're not supposed to call them that anymore, I don't think, but I am writing a male and a female falling in love, so I feel comfortable calling them hero and heroine. Welcome, SD. No worries for being late. We're just getting started with the workbook. The link is in the description for their story development. So brainstorming types of characters, problems my main characters will have. So I do not know yet at this stage if, like, is this first person, is this third person, is it dual perspective? My default tends to be dual perspective, and I like that in a romance. I don't know that I've done a romance that's single perspective. Maybe a short story, but not a full-length novel. So even if it is a single perspective, I would still need to know the main characters' goals, their motivations, their conflicts, the things that we're going to go over in this workbook. But it's doubly important for POV characters because you're in their head regardless. So let's going to assume that we're working on a dual perspective romance, since those are my favorite. So what are the problems that to start with the heroine, the heroine will have? Sometimes I give them temporary names, and sometimes that backfires, and the name that I thought was going to be temporary sticks in my head, and I can't change it. So for now, I haven't even thought about names yet. Nothing has come to me. And sometimes a story will come to me with a name, with a character's name, and this is their name, and that's what it's going to be. So it can come all different kinds of ways. Inspiration is mysterious and not always reliable. All right, so problems for her. So I think that in my vision statement mentioned the life of drudgery, right? Yeah, she's taken from her life of drudgery. So I want to have a little bit of a Cinderella-esque vibe, although she doesn't know that this is her prince yet. I feel like, these kind of relatable things, that she's lonely. She is, I don't know if she's poor. Well, she's probably poor because or at least she's not rich. I don't know if she's actually impoverished, but maybe I will say economically disadvantaged. She is longing for a better life. So these are internal things. And because part of the story is she doesn't know that she is her birthright as this magical being. She has been stolen away from her true family and raised by someone else. But they have either passed away. I was thinking somehow that came to me that she was raised by her grandfather and her grandfather passed away. So she doesn't know much about her family. So she's lonely. She longs for a better life. She longs for connection. And a purpose. I think she longs for a connection, longs for purpose. Figuring out the sort of the longing, the yearning is really important because that speaks to the internal conflict and the internal arc, but that can be manipulated by the external conflict for whatever purposes. So we have a lot of internal stuff going on with this character. And I think it also speaks to the universal fantasies of being taken from this sort of longing, yearning, and being given, if not everything you want, everything you actually need. And that Cinderella aspect, however far I go with the Cinderella story, because it's not going to be, well, I don't know, but that's where we are right now. So our hero, what does he want? So I think that he has this tight crew, this sort of found family of the warriors that he fights with and lives with. So he's not exactly lonely, but he's dissatisfied with his life. I guess they both are, but he wants another career. He is uniquely suited for being a warrior. The idea in my head about this is that these warriors are sort of engineered. They were created, maybe they were like test tube babies or magical test tube babies, something like that, but they are designed to be warriors, and that is they're controlled by someone. Actually, I should put that in the the types of characters because there's someone controlling the warriors, some entity or group. Hello, Whitney Mullen, welcome. So Dragon Maiden asks, should both main characters have problems? I believe yes. I believe your story will be much stronger if both main characters have some kind of problem, and they don't necessarily have to be equal in weight. And if you're only doing a single POV story, you're only inside of one character's head, then that character probably should have the worst problems or the most intense ones that you're following. But every character should change a little bit, or should either change or should enact change on the world. So if you're familiar with KM Weiland, she has a website, helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com, and I love her craft books. Her craft book on character archetypes, or I'm sorry, character arcs. She has archetypes too, but character arcs is talks about the three different character arcs, which is positive change, negative change, and flat arc. And other people talk about this too, but I love her book on this. So I do think that every character who has a speaking role, who has, takes action, should have something a little bit changed. And you don't necessarily have to worry about any more than, the top few, because it's, KM Weiland. Let me put it in the comments. And helping writers become authors is the website. So yes, basically, I think that both main characters should have problems, and any character that is given a POV should definitely have a problem. Now, the definition of problem, you know, is pretty wide. Like, what is a problem? But some sort of tension in their life, something that needs to change, because otherwise it's difficult to follow them and be engaged by their story. Brendan Mellon asks, do you have a favorite craft book? A favorite. I come back the most to Save the Cat, and specifically Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which Save the Cat is by Blake Snyder, and it's about screenwriting. It's written for screenwriters. So I think Jessica Brody is the name of the author who took that and like broadened it to novel writing. So Save the Cat Writes a Novel. It's just the one I keep going back to over and over again. Now I go back to K.M. Weiland's books also. Write Your Novel from the Middle by Scott Bell. I could go on the shelf behind me, but James Scott Bell, yeah. Write Your Novel from the Middle. I will just put the title in the comments. It's very small, so it's might be a tie, and that one is very, very tiny. And I go back to the idea of the mirror moment over and over again. And I'll probably talk about that when we start talking about outlines, which I think is the next session. But I have a lot of favorite craft books. If I had to pick just one, I would pick Save the Cat, because it really helped me learn to plot. And for me, plotting has been very important to finishing books in a timely manner. But obviously, everyone is not a plotter, so I totally understand that. Yeah, so I need someone controlling the warriors. My hero, I haven't figured out. He wants something different for his life. That's his internal character, his internal problem. And Dragon Maiden asks about, does every character have to have problems? I always do an internal problem and an external problem. And for me, that's really vital. When a lot of times the problems I'm having with a book when I'm getting into the writing is because I'm not clear on the internal, and the way that I write, the internal problem has to be solved for them to solve the external conflict. So the external conflict is going to be demons trying to get into our world, and he has to stop them. It's pretty simple in an adventure kind of book. And it's always good when the internal and external clash. So he was born to be a warrior. Demons are coming in. He is primed and ready, genetically engineered to stop them. But what he really wants is to be a librarian. Those are two identities in conflict. For her, how can we make her problems be more in conflict? I think that so she has this job, she's lost her family, the only family that she knows. She doesn't know anything else. She is working a job that she hates, that is, physically difficult, and she doesn't have a lot of options. So I don't know if there's in the beginning of the story if I've identified an external conflict for her. Um, she wants purpose. I like that as an internal goal. But I do, this is kind of showing that I probably need to work a little bit more on her external. Her external comes once the inciting incident happens, once she is taken out of her normal world into this strange new world where things are weird. And so this is something to come back to. Okay, goals. So heroine, her goal is you can think of goals in a different in a couple of different ways. So a character's will probably have multiple goals over the course of the story. They have their initial goal when the book starts. Then usually at the big turning points, goals can shift and change. So, she's working at this hotel. What is her goal? Maybe her goal is to get another job. Maybe her goal is to study for her GED or, take a real estate class. Like she's doing something to get a different job that she hates less. So that might be her initial goal. Get a different job, better job. She's hired into what she thinks is a better job. So instead of, cleaning dozens of hotel rooms every day, uh, she's going to be the housekeeper for this mansion, this one house. And it's still going to be difficult work, but it's better than dealing with the customers. And maybe she was sexually harassed by somebody and they were gross. And so she wants to get out of that situation. So then her goal becomes, impressing her new bosses. And maybe for that, it's there's something tangible. Like, hey, if you work here for a year, then there's a bonus. And then with this bonus, she can do the thing that she really wants to do, which is become a real estate agent or whatever. I'm not sure. I'm probably not going to use that one, but I don't know, maybe. So impresses her new bosses, and this is coming with a stake attached, like stakes. I think we talk about stakes in a little bit. So there's right stakes attached to this. Then, as the weirdness unfolds, her goal becomes to figure out what's happening in this house. So I imagine she's here, she's in this big mansion, cleaning it. There's doors that are locked. It's a very like Rebecca, Hitchcock's Rebecca, or Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, actually, where maybe she's she has a locked door, she can't get in, and she's really trying to because she's going to be nosy. I like nosy characters. And then you have like the creepy butlers following her around and catching her, and she's afraid she's going to lose her job if she keeps up with that. That's one way that it could go. I think might be interesting. So her goal becomes figuring out what's happening in the house, and then as things escalate, it will be if the goals will change. But I think initially that this is probably pretty good. And for my hero, his goals might be he's trying to hide. I think his goal actually, if he really wants to be a librarian, his goal is to be a librarian, like somehow leave his current job and become a librarian. And he doesn't really know how he would do that. And this is just giving me things that I'm gonna have to think more about and kind of figure out what does that mean as I work towards getting an outline and a plot together. What other goals might he have? So, this threat is still happening. So he's got to still defend his home and land or his sector. Like I think they're assigned different sectors, these warriors. So from the incursion, I think he wants to hide his goals from his friends. And hide his dissatisfaction from his friends. Um, and then as the love story commences, he wants to get to know the heroine more. And that's going to be for her to get to know the hero more. For me, when I write a romance, especially I basically only do fantasy or paranormal romance. The actual romance part is the last thing I do. I try to get the non-romantic plot together first, and I feel like the romance can kind of come into place. I know well, some of my friends who are romance writers do that the opposite direction. And who is opposing this goals? So that is our antagonists. It is important to have strong antagonists, even if it's not like an adventure story, and if it's a smaller story, it's not like adventure-y or battle-y. Someone is opposing them. It could be a mother, it's like your mother wants you to marry this person, you want to marry that one, or you don't want to get married at all. Like opposing the goals for the heroine is at first it's going to be the boss at the hotel, and then here, and it's going to be the butler or just all of the people, all of her new bosses, because they're opposing her goal of figuring out what's happening in the house. They're trying to keep her in the dark as much as possible. Um, and then at a certain point, getting to know the hero more, there's going to be that romantic tension. So I have to figure out, is she forbidden from him? Probably. That's always a good way to go. And because, if they get too close, she will figure out what he is, and then she might figure out what she is. And they are all invested in keeping her in the dark. So the hero is going to be opposing her goal. And then on his side, whoever is controlling them. So I think it's like some sort of shadowy organization, their controllers, or magical organization that created these warriors. So they're opposing his desire to become a librarian. And then, the demons who are trying to incur or attack humanity. And then his friends, because he's trying to hide things from his friends. And then the heroine. And then where do they end up? So at the end of this book, I want the heroine to have discovered her true identity. Do I want the hero to leave warrioring behind so that he can work in his library? If this is going to be a series, that might be interesting. He retires, sort of, or maybe he takes a first step. Maybe he can't retire because these demons are still going to be around. We have not probably destroyed the big bad yet, if I do this as a series. But he gets to take some night classes or set up a small library, or he gets a job at the small town library. That's even better. It's a part-time job. And, okay. My primary goal that I should probably put in the vision statement is a goal for myself is to have fun with the story. And so some of my ideas are just going to be what I think would be fun and not heavy. Because I think I just turned in a book that is a little heavier, and I want this one to be extremely light. And that whole pushing daisies thing I was talking about before. That's really hot. Does anyone have any questions so far about this? Did I miss anything? Okay. Just shoot them in there and I will be sure to check. So now the world. Conflicts inherent in the world. All right. Written in Melanin asks, how do you balance having fun with the story with following the outline to not get massively sidetracked? That is a really good question. I'm hoping that the outline process that I do sort of, everything is connected. That's the whole point of tonight, to figure out to do this so that we're starting to weave everything together. We're crafting characters along with the world and the plot. And so hopefully I'm kind of injecting that all along the way so that when it comes to, I get to an outline of a story that makes sense, that this is the kind of the broad strokes of it, the big, if I'm doing like a 1-page outline, let's call it that, because that's going to be very big picture. Big picture, that's sort of what has to happen. And so if I see a squirrel that looks like much more fun, does it take away from this character arc? So I'm building a character at the moment who, is lonely and longing for a better life and longing for connection and purpose, and placing her in a situation where the resolution of the conflict is that, she's going to end up friends with these people, she's going to end up in love, she's going to have this new family and powers. And so that's going to resolve itself. Like it's embedded in the beginning. The problems are the solutions. And so the sidetrack that I could get, if it takes me away from that, then it would take me away from this the origins of the character. So maybe I want to change it. Maybe I don't want her to be lonely and longing for a better life, but like, what else could she be? So there's only so far away from the core, from the spine of the story that I can get. Now I might, discover, oh, I want to have a magical forest, like something like that will be. And that's not a huge sidetrack. Or I decide, oh, I want talking frogs, and I want them to go to this lake, and they meet the talking frogs, and there is a mermaid that comes up too. So we're getting, okay, so what's the point of that? Like, if I'm finding like these little story squirrels that I think are really cool, and I might want to go off on these detours and chase them, I have to come back to the spine that I'm building. And so I would ask myself always, when I think of something cool and have fun, how does that relate? How do I bring it back to the spine and the core of the story that I'm telling? And it would have to do that. Otherwise, I would have to change everything. And I probably don't want to change everything because I thought of this cool new little thing that I might want to put in. So it's a matter of, can I just get in a couple of talking frogs, um, and not veer wildly over there? So keep the heart of the story the same. The body, exactly. The body stays the same, even if the outfit changes. Exactly. That is what I am trying to say. You have summed it up very nicely. Um, so hopefully, yeah, that helps. And Dragon Maiden said, this is generating more characters. It does tend to do that. I will dump out all the characters at this stage, and then later on really see if I can combine them, because I might not need all of them. Sometimes it's like, okay, there's a character, doing X and a character doing Y. Could that be the same person? Is there any way that I can consolidate? Because consolidating your cast is often a good idea. So yeah, that is another tip to do. So the conflicts inherent in this world. So again, the world overview, there are demons. There is a organization who creates warriors to fight the demons. Powers are involved. Magic is involved. The conflicts are the battle between the organization, which is called org, and demons, in which these warriors are a tool. So my warriors are a tool. So that already kind of tells me that this org is, I think I called it shadowy earlier. It's like they're doing good because they are battling the demons, but they're not great. And they're also, how much control are the warriors under? How much supervision? What are the boundaries that they have? Like, it's going to be difficult for my hero to end up working at this library because there's characters, there's opposing forces, so the conflicts are there. And then there's also these supernatural must be kept secret. We're not exactly sure why. There's a reason why our heroine was stolen, and from her family, and not told of her identity. So we have a question: what are the advantages of dual protagonists in a story and being opposites? If you have two protagonists and they're not in opposition in some way, then like, why? I would say. So the advantages of having your protagonists being, they don't have to necessarily be opposite characters. I mean, opposite is one way to go, but I feel like there should be a conflict there. There should be some kind of tension between these two characters. Otherwise, why are there two of them? If they're kind of coming at the same place from the same mindset, then you probably don't need two of them. You probably don't need those two characters there if there's nothing super different about them, if they don't look at the world in a different way, if they don't have different motivations or a different paradigm or mindset. Like, story is conflict, and it doesn't have to be they're at war with each other, but it could be, Coke versus Pepsi. Like, something has to be a little bit, something has to cause some tension. And I think your story is much more powerful. If uh, if that's not present, it just feels like that's a weaker stance, and it'll have to be addressed, and it's going to cause problems down the line. I mean, there's always exceptions, I'm sure, but yeah, you have to figure out some kind of tension between the characters. So, forces of antagonism, again, it's similar to the other question, but we have, the demons, the org, the unsuspecting town people who need to be kept unsuspecting. Um, those are kind of the big forces, and then just secrecy. I think the idea of secrecy of the supernatural world is sort of a force of antagonism. Is there, you thought, is there a body, another organization, or another group that is tasked with making sure people keep the secret? So maybe there's some sort of law enforcement, magical law enforcement. And sometimes, like writing that is like, oh, is that going to be too heavy? That feels like it's too much at the moment for me to have the demons and the organization controlling my warriors, and then adding magical law enforcement feels like a lot. But I think there's got to be some kind of ruling body, like a king or a queen of this magical version of the world, ruling body or government. I don't want like magical police coming around, and also a representative of this organization. That just feels, in my gut, it just feels wrong, like, or too much. Like, I'm doing too much. Um, like, we're generating more characters, but we do have to keep an eye on it being reasonable, and it overwhelming the story and that you're trying to tell. And so, yeah, I'm just going to put an asterisk next to that, because maybe that exists in the world, but we don't really have to see anything in it of it in the story, because I'm not feeling good about that. A lot of this is vibes. A lot of this is like intuition and vibes and learning to trust yourself. And if you are a new writer, if you haven't finished a book before, or if you're finished some but you haven't been happy with them, then the more you write, and the more you trust your intuition and you trust the story, by writing more and then going back and reading it and deciding if you actually like it or not, or getting feedback from readers and critique partners and things like that. How many characters becomes too many? That is It is hard to say, because there are very successful books with tons of characters. Song of Ice and Fire, there's like 45 POV characters. I think there's literally 30 POV characters or something like that. Like, that's too much for me, but it's not too much for all the people who loved that book. I would say early in your career, like, don't do that until you are like a master of your craft, right? Like, you've been in the game for decades at that point. I wouldn't try 30 POV characters. Uh, it it is story dependent. So if you are if you are writing, epic fantasy, you have more leeway with having more POV characters. I think the most I've done is like 7 or 8, and that was like book 4 of a series. I'm gonna first show these. 30 POV, that's distressing. That's right. Yes, it is. Uh, And I mean, like, don't quote me on that, but I feel like I read that or I heard that somewhere. I did not read A Song of Ice and Fire, but there were dozens of POV characters. So yeah, it is it's kind of, you have to feel your way through it, but start small and learning to manage multiple POV characters. So okay, there's characters and then there's POV characters. definitely start a little smaller with your POV characters until you feel like you are okay. Yeah, there are 31 over the first 5 books. I knew I saw that somewhere. Thank you, Wandering Lynn. How many characters on stage? If you are building a small town that's like quirky and there's lots of shop owners and you want to give the feeling of a lot of people, then you're going to have more characters who you might just see them like 2 or 3 times during the course of the book. Or you could want to create a much smaller, closer environment and only have a few characters on the stage. So it is easy for the number of characters to get away from you. Everyone that has a name, even if they don't have any dialogue, um, there should be like a reason. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be written in the story, but like there should be a reason why it was this character as opposed to combining all of that into another. You know how in movie adaptations or television adaptations, they will often combine characters just because of the screen time. But if you think about it, could the author have done that? And when does it take away when they're combining these characters? Sometimes they cut them completely, but sometimes they will take, okay, this was the best friend and this was the cousin, and we're just going to combine them in one character because of we don't need 2 people to do that. Now, in a book, you have more time and space than a movie, so it's okay to have a few more. But think about everybody who interacts should have a purpose, and every named character should have a purpose. And then what makes this world unique and special? For me, I think it's having these like, I'm going to say genetically engineered. Let's call it magically engineered because I don't think it's actually sci-fi. It's not genetically. I like these magically engineered warriors. Like, what does that mean for them? Like, how I just thought of what was that show with Jessica Alba, Dark Angel? That was more sci-fi, and they were like literally genetically engineered. I'm sure there's a million shows like that, but that was the one I watched when I was in college. And I don't actually remember anything about it, but I remember they were distressed. Like they were kind of living on their own in like a warehouse or something. Maybe I'm thinking of a different show. One of those kinds of shows, and this is a trope, where, they're grown, they don't have parents, they don't have families, they're trained, they're like Black Widow, they're trained up and put into the world to do a thing. But they're human beings, they've got emotions. And so that is inherent. That's like conflict inherent. Anyway, unique and special. I want to do some sort of, I think you're thinking of Dollhouse. Maybe I'm thinking of Dollhouse because I did watch that too. I'm thinking of like 5 different shows that all had the same tropes, and I'm mixing them all up because this brain, it's like it can only hold so much information. I want to do something like very whimsical. I don't know exactly what that means yet, but I want fun, Technicolor, pushing daisies, visual inspiration type of things happening in the world that are also magical. So whimsical, magical world. And I'd have to probably think more about what that means. But for me right now, and then the other thing about this that I'm like trying to make it unique and special is the time period and the aesthetic. So like this mid-century fantasy time period. Mid 20th century, I guess I should say 1950s. Any century. Ish. And then what kind of stories can only take place in this world? So that is more of, I think we talked about that a little bit before, but I'm still working on the world. And so I think there's stories about, this is a world where the supernatural is hidden. So the story of finding out, but what are the powers? This question is really about me asking more questions to flesh out the world building and what does this mean? And so there's a lack of technology. That is very interesting. When you set a story in the past before cell phones, it opens up more conflict. So you have the conflict where someone needs to get in contact with someone and they're not answering the phone, and there is literally no way to get a hold of them. So There's lack of technology, which could influence the conflict. And J.C. Henry brings us back to Dark Angel. Yes, they were genetically modified. They were hunted. Oh, because they escaped, right? They were hunted by the corporation that made them. That could be a cool thing. Have my warriors escaped, and is there some other conflict going on? Sometimes also, I tend to go super complicated initially, and then as the outline process happens, I have to pare down to something simple because my go-to is to make it as complicated as possible, but I know this about myself, and I actively try to not do that to my readers as much as possible. What approach would you recommend for a book that is partially written without any outline when I want to use the outline method, start from scratch, or apply this method and continue? So it's partially written. Um, you don't have to start from scratch. No, I think you can work what you have, what you know, through this method. So if you're going through this workbook, there's a lot more that you know because you're in it, you're living in it. Um, and then you can take what you've already written and use that as your guideline and then outline the rest of it. Um, yeah, I think that I tend to only start from scratch when I've taken months away from a book. But yeah, if you've been kind of working on it and you're really focused on it, you maybe just hit a wall, or you think that having an outline now would be helpful, just run everything through and see, what you know and what you don't know, and and start from there would be my advice. Um, so yeah, what other stories could only take place in this world? Once I figure out the magic, this will help too, but like, how does the magic influence things? Thinking that stuff through. And depending on the world that you're creating, you're going back to the world building checklist and looking through conflicts. Like if you're writing the Regency story, how do the laws, how does the customs and the culture of that time period influence what your characters can and can't do? Class is involved, gender is involved, race might be involved. There's all kinds of things. And then if you have that ghost aspect, um, yeah, what is this world and the structure that you're thinking about, or the structure that you've already put on it, how does that impact everything? And anyone who would like to share their story in the comments, yeah. JK Lambo asks, what everyone is working on. Um, I would love to know too. It's always fun to hear what people are working on. So the goal for today is to get to a log line. So this is sort of a brainstorm the elements of the log line. And I'll skip ahead to the bottom to show you sort of the format that I use. So this is just one example of a logline format. The protagonist must face obstacles from an antagonist in order to reach the goal before the stakes happen. So, okay, this is how we do this. If you're kind of starting from a very early point and you're not sure of your protagonists, and then you're not sure of these people, you could list them. This is kind of what I did when I was working on the Monsters We Defy. I knew I had some archetypes, but I wasn't exactly sure. So with this story, with where I'm at now, I have a much better idea, but you could use this to say, in your spooky Regency romance, like if you probably know who your hero and heroine or your main characters are, whatever gender they might be. But like, if you're not sure, maybe there's a police detective, maybe there's a street urchin, maybe it's a duchess, a noblewoman. Like, list them out if you're not sure. So mine is a young woman, a lonely young woman. I like to put the adjective in there. That is not how you spell that. So the protagonist, what is her goal? Longing to find a better life. It's one of her goals. We kind of go back up and see, all right, what did I say her goals were? Better job, impressing her new bosses, figuring out what's happening. The ultimate story question is, the ultimate story question is not whether she gets a better job or whether she impresses her bosses. The ultimate story question in that story spine that I mentioned is she's going to have to discover who she is. That's the point of the book. So I would put her goal is to discover keep this as a brainstorming thing. Her goal is to discover truth about her secretive new employers, obstacles to that, when everyone is trying to hide from her, or the mandate. Yes, there is. If you go to lpen.co/storydive, you can download this workbook that I'm in right now and use it, copy it into your Google Docs, and you can use it to keep the supernatural world. So there's the sort of the personal. The logline is really, for me, it's about the external. You could do another logline that's really the internal arc. But I find that if you're using this for marketing, like another reason to do a logline is down the road when you're marketing the book, it's helpful. But right now, I focused on where we are right now, not getting too far ahead of ourselves. I use it to direct the writing. And so if I can synthesize everything into this story statement, this logline for the external arc, that lets me know that it's probably a book that I can write, a story that I can sustain over a book length manuscript and all of that. So that an obstacle to her finding the truth is this mandate to keep the supernatural world hidden. Now the antagonists, he's a protagonist too. So we have also our warrior. And even though this is a romance, if a more contemporary romance, you might have your protagonist and antagonist be your two love interests. For this story, there is an external antagonist also. So you have multiple ideas. Would you recommend doing this outline for all current ideas at once or one at a time? So totally different stories. I would say, yeah, go through it with each story idea so that you can figure out which one you want to work on and which one is kind of pulling you, which one has the most energy or you're just most interested in. Because usually there'll be something. Or if you're equally interested in all of them, if you're able to fill out more about one than the other, that means you know more about it, or there's more in your head about it. So that could be another way to decide. But yeah, I would say do it for everything. And then if you really can't figure out what's going on, or if you just want to have it started, and so once you're finished your current project, you can just dive right in and you've already done some of the groundwork on another idea. So an unhappy warrior and his goals. I'll just do a little divider for her and him. We have a lonely young woman. His external goal is actually to defeat warriors. There's a lot going on. The antagonist would be the demons, but also this shadowy organization. We're calling it the org. And stakes. So the stakes, the different goals are going to be different. The stakes for her, discovering the truth about her employers. This speaks to something that, like the dark moment, the real end, the big battle at the end, and that big conflict, which is going to have to logically, if I'm following the story spine that I've created, where this character, the point of the external arc is for her to discover the truth about herself. She has a magic. She is some other creature. That has to be important for them solving the end problem. So the most basic version of this is that the bad guys, the demons, at the end in the third act where we have our big battle. I say big battle because I still want it to be cozy, but there's going to be some kind of conflict, some kind of big conflict at the end. It has to be, well, it doesn't have to be. I shouldn't say that. But the first version of this is that the demons attack. Warriors have to defend. Somehow she's caught in the middle. by this time, I think she's realized that the supernatural world exists. She realizes who she is. She is to be instrumental in solving that problem. This connects everything together and makes the most sense. So the stakes of this world are like before demons take over the world or whatever. It's probably not going to be that big because, like I said, in the type of story that I'm telling, I don't think that like life and death world stakes go with the cozy 1950s vibe. I still want to have the demons. So I have to brainstorm other stakes for the particular story that I'm telling and make sure they fit everything else. Because right now, I'm not like loving this idea. It's also the first idea that popped into my head. So, the first ones are never the best. I know I can dig deeper, find something more interesting that I'm more interested in as I work through the process. But you do have to brainstorm without judgment and get it all out. So demons take over the world. Lower stakes would be the town. So maybe it's just the stakes are for the town. It's in jeopardy. That feels more cozy to me. I like that. Already the vibe is there. Welcome, Era 94. I'm here all month. Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm doing this for Preptober. And hopefully we can do some live write-ins during November, and then we'll see how it goes. Town stakes. All right. So I'd probably work on this some more until I can get to something like, let's see if we can do it. A lonely young woman and an unhappy warrior who want to save their town from the demon scourge. Huh. Oh, the link, the doc is this link here, lpen.co/storydev. It should be in the description also. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this live just because it'll probably take me too long. But something, because I'm thinking now, also doing the log line shows you where opportunities are and maybe to shift some things. So, lonely young woman and an unhappy warrior together, their common goal is going to be of the big story spine. The overarching story is to stop the demons from attacking this town while keeping the secret of the supernatural creatures. So the obstacle is, I mean, the demons are obviously the obstacle, but something else has to be there. Maybe not. And the stakes are before the town is destroyed and the people discover the supernatural world. So it would go something like that. All right, I'm just going to take a stab at it. Lonely woman and a supernatural warrior must protect their town from an invasion of demons. I want to change demons because it makes me laugh whenever I say it. There's a way to do demons well, and plenty of writers and paranormal and fantasy writers do demons, and it doesn't make them laugh. It makes me laugh, so I'm gonna have to make them call them something different. But for now, a lonely woman and a supernatural warrior must protect their small town from an invasion of demons before the town is destroyed. Without destroyed, all while keeping the people oblivious of the existence of the supernatural world. I think maybe something there would have to change because the most important thing at this point is not that she's lonely, but that's fine. This gives me like a basis to work from, and I would revise this and keep working on it. Yeah. What this tells me, though, and why I find that doing this is really helpful, and because it's focusing me on what is the real, like, how am I going to pitch this to someone? If someone's like, "What's your book about?" I should be able to give them a sentence. You don't want to, when someone asks you what's your book about, and you're still talking 10 minutes later, their eyes have glazed over. So really, we want to be able to communicate our ideas really succinctly and in this statement. by doing this statement, I've already, figured out that I don't want the world stakes for the story I'm telling. I like these stakes, town stakes, like smaller, cozier, more comfortable stakes. Um, and it gives me the conflict. So really, it's not just about fighting the demons, because that is more of an aggressive story. And I don't know that I'm not trying to tell a super aggressive story. It's really protecting them, protecting the town, and keeping the secret. And so it's really about secrets. And so once my heroine discovers the secret of her own identity, that will allow her to help keep the secret to protect the other people who don't need to know. Cool. All right. That's where we are. I like this for now. Like, I don't like that, but it's good. It's a good first step. And I will go over it some more and sort of kind of just iterate through this process, make the decisions, see how it feels. When we talk about the outlines in our next video, which is going to be Wednesday, October 11th, if you're joining us live, we'll go more deeper, and I'm sure I will learn more about that. So it's a process. It's not going to be like the final version right now, but I think I've done enough to feel okay with this. Any other questions before we go? I do have a whole course on world building. This is like a little piece of it. The link should be in the description as well. It's called Imaginary World Building, and it's also in the, of course, in the workbook. But and we're doing a cohort in January of 2024. So it's a self-paced course. You can do it whenever you want, but if you would like to do it with other people and have live sessions with me where I actually talk about, you get to a little hot seat where we talk about your story and we work on your story, check that out. That is open for registration. Welcome, Ash. Yes, I'm wrapping up. I've been talking for an hour, which is probably my limit. But if there are any final questions, let me know. And thanks, y'all, for joining me, for coming. It's always cool to have you all here, have the good energy, and to hear a little bit more about your stories. And hopefully you're getting good information and good ideas for your stories. I hope that you can do the cohort. Thank y'all. All right. If you're live, I'll see you Wednesday, hopefully. If you're on the replay, there's another video coming up where we're going to do our first pass at the outline, and I'm excited for that. So have a good evening, or wherever you are, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.